I think we're
There
live.
we go.
Are we live?
Yay, we did
We're
it!
live.
We did it! We made it!
If you guys can hear us, if you can see us, can you post a little commenty bit in the little say something nice section so we know that we're live? Hey, amazing.
Hello, everybody! This is so beautiful.
Oh, I love it. Hello, and welcome to this amazing event with Randa Jarrar talking about this beautiful, beautiful book, Love is an Ex-Country. You can buy the book from Lighthouse Books. There was a link. I think Noura's going to post it into the chat any second now. So you can buy it directly from there. Do also tweet us at Lighthouse BKS, at Randa Jarrar, or at Afshan D'souza-Lodhi. Sorry, I forgot to actually introduce myself in the excitement that we are now live in front of people. And a breath. My name is Afshan. I'm a poet and playwright based in Manchester in the UK. And I am a queer Muslim, sort of Muslim, definitely queer person, an artist. First of all, Randa, I just want to thank you for writing this book, because I needed this book 10 years ago. I needed this book 15 years ago. I needed this book like when I was born. I lived my life looking for this book, and I found it, and it made me cry. So there might be some tears today. Apologies if that happens. I've got my kitchen roll ready for if it does.
That's perfect. Yes, you need a large one. Yes, perfect.
So I want to start by asking you, how has it been writing and publishing this book during a pandemic?
It's been, I mean, honestly, it's been really nice to be able to hang out at home and still reach readers. I feel like most writers, you know, that's what we're doing anyway. We're using social media, we're using blogs, we're using, you know, like that's how I started out reaching readers, was through blogging back in 2002 and 2003. So yeah, it doesn't feel strange to me. The only part that I don't like is, like, I love signing books, and like I love having someone come and talk to me about what they liked if they've already read it. But I am going to be signing a bunch of book plates and sending them to Sandstone. So if anyone wants that, yes, they are right here. They're beautiful.
Cute. Very, very cute. I love that. I love that idea of like making it personal and bringing the intimacy back into publishing. And you've written so much nonfiction, so much fiction. I guess, like, as a writer, I'm really interested in your choice to write memoir, and choice to write memoir in this really specific kind of non-linear, like almost magical way. Can you tell me a little bit about that choice?
Yes. So I've written a ton of fiction, and because I love writing in the first person, that's really like I also act. So as a performer, I really love the monologue. I love that sort of position as a subject, instead of kind of being constantly objectified or placed outside of that subject position by, you know, whatever, colonial powers, the police, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. So, but then I also really love poetry, and I love nonfiction books by poets. Like, I tend not to like nonfiction books by purely nonfiction writers, no offense. Yeah, and so for me, I wanted to write that kind of book, something experimental-ish, something challenging. And I really didn't feel like my story, you know, I've had to straighten it out and do all sorts of unqueering to it to make it into fiction, right? Not that my fiction isn't queer, it's very queer, but I wanted to tell my own story in the way that it has unfolded for me, which is not linear, not easily put into, you know, when the worst thing ever is for someone to ask me where I'm from, because like, do you have 15 minutes, sir, at the bus station? Hello.
I think that's what was really lovely for me was seeing the humor and reading the humor and reading the poetry. There's so much in there that I was like, I had to reread that line again and again and again. And then, like I said, it made me cry. And then I had to put the book away, make myself a cup of tea, give myself a hug, and then start reading again. Because it's like, it's really, I just feel like there's so much of your work that speaks to my own existence. And I'm sure a lot of Muslim people's existence, a lot of women of color, a lot of migrants, a lot of queer women. But I think the humor for me is what really stands out. It's what kind of puts this book together. Because you're really fucking funny. Like,
Thank you.
Absolutely hilarious. There's this, and maybe you want to talk about it. There's sort of instances with, like, there was a scene with the security guard that you described, leaving a supermarket trolley for a security guard to watch over, and just the way that you describe it. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. Just that experience for you, how it was writing it out, and almost outing yourself as, I don't know if I want to give it away, like, but.
No, it's okay. The one where the security guard had these like really long lashes.
No, it's a security guard that was like hiding the tampons that you'd stolen.
Another security guard.
Another security guard. There's this, and you just describe it as like you stole the tampons.
Oh
and
yeah,
you needed to pee. And I was like, I'm sorry, you had the security guard watch over your stolen tampons while you go piss. Like, that's amazing.
Right. Yes. So that's like, I loved, when I was like thinking about putting this book together, I was thinking about like those kinds of moments in my life that like I used my ability to kind of, like, hi, yes, I have a symmetrical face, I'm light skinned, like I can get away with certain things. And so I've really enjoyed getting away with certain things like shoplifting and other things. And yeah, that moment where I steal these tampons, but then, because I refuse to pay for tampons. I mean, in America, we even get taxed on our tampons. Yeah. It's just out of control and ridiculous. So yeah, that was really fun. Just making the person who's supposed to be surveilling me surveil the things that are, coming home with me, even if I didn't pay for them.
And I think the description is so visceral, and so there's no shame in the way that you describe. You talk about sex, and you talk about your body in a way that feels so freeing. How was it getting to that point, I guess, for yourself, as a migrant woman, as someone who, you describe as like your body is your mother's body, that's
yes, that was, I think that the answer to this question is, I feel like it's in the book. Like you have to actually like go through the whole book to see the ways that I've decided to show up for myself in moments when there was no one really there to protect me, and realizing that really there's no one will protect us. And like earlier when you were saying kind of Muslim, I decided, by the way, last night, I was going down the stairs and I was holding my dog and my phone and a glass of water. And as I took the first step, I just said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And like, in that moment, I was like, oh, that's all it is. You're Muslim. If you count on God as you're going down a staircase, like possibly about to die or fall to your death or to injury, then you're Muslim. Like there's no, what else is there, right? Like, but yeah, I think just realizing that, there's not, while I'm alive, while I'm in this like flesh sack or whatever you want to call the body, right? I'm not in control. Other people are in control. So the one thing I can control is the love that I give to myself, the acceptance and the kindness that I can give to my body, and I just hear so many women and femmes and queers talking about how they hate certain parts of their bodies.
Yeah.
And I just think, why? Like, why would you hate your arms? Your arms help you lift things. Your arms, I mean, it's like, so just shifting that to, shifting from sort of self-judgment and all of that to a sense of self-forgiveness and kindness.
Yeah, but I guess it also comes from the society, right? The idea of like shame and honor, that that gaze that's put onto our bodies, particularly as bigger women, particularly as women of color, and then queer women. And you know, reading your book, I saw so many instances of you loving yourself, like you say, that it's like revolutionary for someone, you know, who maybe I didn't have that experience growing up. I was quite sheltered, so it's really nice to see, and I didn't until recently kind of like come out in that way. So it's really good to see your experiences with sex and the way that you talk about being a good Muslim or a bad Muslim and how you identify with those terms is really fun and interesting. And I guess like another theme, I guess, for me in the book, something that I picked up on was family. In terms of like your own motherhood, your own mother, your own father, adopted family in the form of Tonti V, I think it was. You know, can you talk a little bit about your relationship to your family growing up versus now, and how you kind of decided which bits to put into the memoir and which bits not to? I know that, you know, your parents read your work, or they might read your work. There's an assumption. Yeah, how did you decide which bits to put in and which bits to leave out?
I think so. My family and I have an understanding at the moment, which is that they will not be reading this book in particular. So yeah, I asked all of them. You know, I had a couple of very difficult conversations with, especially my mother. She didn't understand why I was going over the bad parts and the sad parts again. And I tried to explain it to her, and I think she understands now. She's like, oh, you need to get all that out, which isn't necessarily the truth. No, that's not really it, but that's how she wants to understand it, and that's fine. But my dad read my first book, which is, you know, a novel, not even a memoir. And he didn't speak to me for 7 years because he was so offended by apparently the sex scenes. I'm like, what sex scenes? There's a lot of masturbation scenes. There's like maybe one sex. I mean, there's barely any sex scenes. So, but those were the best 7 years of my life. I'm just gonna say, like, not having to talk to my dad for 7 years. So yeah, and so for me, the parts that made it in the book, whenever I write, I try to not think about people that I have a duty towards. I tend to remove duty from the equation. And I think, you know, everyone who is involved can also tell their own story. And I might not, you know, if my son writes a memoir, I might not look that great in it, you know? I mean, I'll be pissed because I'll be like, listen, I sacrificed so much for you. I would just turn into typical Arab mama, you know, and just be like, what are you saying? But he's still allowed to that. He's still, that's his right, right? So, but with this book, there's a lot that didn't make it in, specifically my father's abuse of my mother, because I wanted to really focus, and of my brother, because I really wanted to focus on my own story, and I felt like those were their stories to tell, really.
Yeah, and I mean, you've hinted at it. It's not like you've completely, you know, I definitely got that sense through it, but I also felt like there was, just with all of it, I was like, there's so much detail in it, and you've had such a roller coaster of a life. So much has, like, you've survived and come through and celebrated, that I wonder there's so much more of your life that I don't know about. And you know, and I'm like
really bad ex-girlfriends. Like, just really bad ex-girlfriends, you know, that I was like, I am not putting these bitches in my book because they don't deserve it. And I know they read my stuff, because one of my ex-girlfriends sent me some ridiculous message a couple of years ago about my book, about my second book. And I just thought, how dare you contact me after the shenanigans you pulled? But yeah, so yeah, there's not everything is in there, obviously, but yeah, and there are some things that are just sort of boring that maybe, you know, I just didn't feel like were worthy or not really that interesting to put in. Like, for example, just being on the road and like just gas station food, like food from you know, from a mobile or from a whatever, getting petrol in my car and like having to deal with eating nothing but peanuts and a banana. You know, it's just awful. So things like that didn't make it in.
But there is, again, like a deadpan humor as well to, I think, some of the repetition and the way that you talk about your journey through everything. There's particular scenes where I can imagine that ex-boyfriends, ex-lovers, ex-partners might come forward and be like, yo, that's a really terrible light to put me in, or it's a really embarrassing light to put me in, or it kind of, you know, particularly with sex, because it's such a sensitive, or it becomes such a sensitive topic, particularly for Muslim women to talk so openly about. You know, there's a whole section, there's loads of about kink, for example, and your journey through that. And, you know, I guess like the contrast between not having control over your own body versus like demanding control over your body. That's, I don't know if you want to say something about that, but I just found that like absolutely phenomenal, the way that you've portrayed that.
Yeah, so for me, it's a lot of it is about consent. So just like consenting to whatever act that you want to consent to. And weirdly enough, like I'm actually not that into kink anymore. I mean, I am, but not to the level I was when I was writing the book, because I think I'm just on a journey, you know? But I mean, I'm selling my spanking horse at 3 p.m. So in 3.5 hours, some hot queer person I've never met is going to come over and pick up my spanking horse and give me my because it's a pandemic, it's a pandemonium, and there's no one for me to spank. So what's the point, right? But yeah, I think like in terms of consent, with those lovers, especially like the person that I have a very long chapter on, who was very physically abusive, but a very good lover. Yeah, he's been very upset about the book and been, you know, threatening things, even though it's like he knows that once he comes forward, then he's outing his actual self, because I've made him anonymous in a lot of ways. But he didn't have my consent to, you know, to beat me, punish me, impregnate me, all of those things. So for me now, my way of getting back is to tell my story without his consent to tell it. So, you know, there's a kind of like liberation in that. And a lot of, or a few of my ex-lovers who are in the book actually know that they're in the book. So specifically like the fuckboy that's in Washington State. And then the people that I've played with, they don't know, but the person who runs that dungeon knows. And she's great. She's just like a really great dom. Everyone should follow her. Her name is Justine Cross. She's on Twitter. I'll just write down right here her name, so in case anyone is interested in following this amazing sphincter who runs the dungeon in the book.
I guess I've noticed this weird trend of like people approaching queer Muslim women to sub to, or to be sort of like money slave. What is that about? What is
it's not centering, it's about continuing to center themselves. That's really, it's very simple. It's just them, you know, I've had especially over pandemic, I've had a lot of, you know, white men specifically write to me saying, I would like to be your slave. You know, I want you to be my whatever. I want you to torture me, tell me how to live my life. I'm like, I don't have time for that. Like, I don't give a shit about what you do with your life. You know, I'm not here. And then, you know, usually I just send them a link to Black Lives Matter fundraiser or something. And then I say, if you send me the receipt to this, we can start talking. And then they do. And I'm like, just kidding. Bye. You know?
And okay, so that kind of activism, I think, is amazing, right? And you've done it kind of like throughout your entire life, it seems, this sort of in light, you know, in the face of trolls, you know, and I'm talking specifically in this case, I guess, about the Barbara Bush incident, if we should call it that. But the way, you know, the way that you kind of approach that by putting a suicide hotline out instead of your own number, I think was absolutely amazing. As a way
Thank
of
you. I've lost friends over that.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Why? What?
Mm. People thought that I was making light of suicide. It was actually a crisis hotline, not a suicide hotline. So even in my stoned and drunken frenzy in Tunisia, while I was on this counter troll operation that I was mounting, I still thought, I should look for a crisis hotline, not a specifically suicide hotline, because I felt like these people were in crisis. But yeah, I can be a troll too. Like I can out troll a troll. I think that people like us who've survived a lot of shit can be very savvy about that, because we've had to find ways to resist in spaces where there's absolutely there's not a single inch being given for us to be able to resist.
It's also taking up space though in a completely different way to, on one level where we're being asked to be made smaller, the kind of like being approached by men, for example, to dom for, or to fight back trolls in the way that you are doing. That's another form of taking up space. And I think another theme for me that came out of this memoir was, the space in terms of land, space in terms of body, and your relationship to that. I guess as someone who's lived in many different parts of the world and had space taken away or kind of been asked to be made smaller, what is your relationship right now, post-Trump? I think post-Trump, I don't know where we are. In this kind of middle ground, what is your relationship? And, being in a lockdown in pandemic, what is your relationship to space like?
It's been really interesting because, first of all, I think we might be post-Trump, but we're pre-mega-Trump right now. Like I'm thinking this is the pre-days of whatever monstrous thing is going to come at us. But yeah, my relationship with space it's still kind of fraught. Like I specifically decided to move to Los Angeles so that I could be finally living in a city, like an actual city, where the weather was good, because I've been oppressed by weather my entire life. And as people in the UK, you probably understand this. It's oppressive. Like even it's something you have no control over. So I thought, okay, I'm going to move somewhere where it's sunny for the most part. And I also decided to live in a home that doesn't border other homes. So there's a bit of land that's here that no one has bought yet, and a bit of land here. And I really enjoy this, like this kind of like getting the privilege I have right now to separate from human beings and just live in this one small house on a hill where if anyone comes up the stairs, I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? Like very protective. I'm very protective of my space. I'm very protective of my filthy house. It's definitely not the cleanest house, but it's mine. And yeah, I'm so much, I value comfort. I feel like my body has been through a lot. Even just all of us, just by virtue of having a body, our bodies have been through a lot because bodies are ridiculous. So yeah, my whole thing is being comfortable, being safe. And every day I think to myself, do I really need this much space? Should I move into a studio? Like, it's not even that much space. I'm not used to just having my own, as someone who parented from a very young age. My son just moved out a year and a half ago. So yeah, it's been nice. It's been nice. There's an Instagram video on my account where I'm walking around. You can't see anything. It's from the chest up, but I'm just singing naked in my house, walking naked in my house, naked in my house. Cause I get to claim the space in my house, which I've never been able to. Like as a child, it was just impossible to walk around naked, So yeah, it's been really nice.
But there's also a nakedness assumed of our bodies when we talk about sex and when we talk about sexuality, and especially in the ways that you do, in an open, frank way. And you know, we talked a little bit about your parents having difficulties maybe with some of the sexuality or the sex that you write about. Do you feel like it's an activist choice to carry on writing about sex in this way? Is it yeah?
One of the things that I think has been really interesting throughout my writing career, I started publishing books in 2008, has been not just my parents' reaction, honestly, but critics, especially in the US. So, you know, the US is just very prudish about sex and very, very patriarchal. And, you know, there's sex scenes, but there's a lot of white space between when a character gets into bed with someone and the day after. There's not a lot of engagement with what happens with bodies. And I think number one is because it's very difficult to do. It's difficult to write about sex. And number two, it's difficult to write about sex when you have a lot of hang-ups and you're in a culture that has a lot of hang-ups about sex.
Yeah.
So hearing critics say things like, this book would have benefited from less, you know, this is my first book, from less descriptive whatever sentences about sexuality or whatever. And to me, that's ridiculous, because if you're going to write, you know, a coming of age novel, coming has to happen in a coming of age novel.
Thank you.
It's just the way it is. You can't divorce the body. It's necessary. That's the thing. It's a necessary thing to talk about. And so as much as I want to, like, you know, talk shit about my family and how prudish they might be about sexuality, I actually think my family is such a small part of a really huge culture that includes non-Muslims, by the way. Because at least in Islam, it's like, if you're not pleasing your wife, you're not a good Muslim.
Right. Exactly.
There are, you know, like,
yeah,
there's more of an idea about how sex is such an important part of union with another person. So yeah, I think that we need to, like, really take a step back and think about the ways that also, like, Victorian era rules and morals and all of that you know, how they affected our cultures, you know, in the global South, and the ways that, yeah, people came into our spaces and saw the ways that we, you know, people existed outside of two genders. We always have.
Yeah.
People are non-binary in a lot of ways. Queerness is just something that maybe was not spoken, but was just normal.
I think that's what I find really interesting about the Colonial Project, is the way that it came in and switched the narrative from, you know, and switched narrative to now, that we're now looking back at places like India, for example, and going, oh, how backward they are. They've only just legalized homosexuality, or how backward this country is. And I'm like, but prior to the, you know, to the empires coming in and colonizing, those countries were free. And it was a prudish, like, Victorian, you know, Edwardian behavior that came in and switched that narrative completely, and is now shaming us for not being open and not being queer enough, or, you know, sexual enough. And in terms of, like, so, like, for me, like, I came through my sexuality by reading and finding books that wrote about sex. And I'm hoping my mom isn't on the call, but I read a lot. And I'd read loads of Western books, white Western books. Not that I had any other option to read anything otherwise, that predominantly talked about sex. So I'm really interested, what were your inspirations when you were growing up reading wise? You know, were you reading a lot about sex? Or did you, how was that for you?
It was really difficult to find anything about sex when I was younger, but definitely, like, Judy Blume, you know, someone slipped me some Judy Blume, and I was like, what? This is incredible. You know, that book Forever, there's like a couple of sex scenes in there. The day that she tweeted me back was one of the greatest days of my life.
Wow.
It was incredible. I was like, our heroes, you know. But beyond that, it was very difficult to find any writing about sex when I was not living in the US. Once I moved to the US, it was like all bets were off. I was reading like Black lesbian erotica at the library if I could find it, you know. Yeah, I tried to find the most commercial things and then tried to find in there the sex scenes. Like finding, yeah, like reading Marguerite Duras and being like, what is going on? And just yeah, constantly trying to excavate and find. And also because I'm such a nerd, I was 16 when I started college, when I started university. Mm-hmm. So
wow, okay.
when we were like assigned all these amazing books that were super horny and weird. And yeah, I feel like that reading that was really helpful to me. But I remember once, like, reading or writing a sex, like not a sex scene, but a sexy description of a woman walking through a forest. And as she was walking, she was becoming more and more naked. So I actually talked to a comic book writer called Jaime Hernandez a few years ago about his comics called Love and Rockets. He tends to draw large women, and he does it so well. Like, he really shows the ways that our flesh curves and falls. And we asked him, like, when did you start doing this? And he said, I couldn't find pictures of women, so I drew them. You know, so like just kind of like writing your own porn, writing your own, finding your own smut and like creating it yourself when you can't access it. Because I grew up in Kuwait, where in Kuwait specifically, there was no kissing on television. So so my entire understanding was like every time two heads got close to each other, there was an abrupt because they were being censored. But then in Egypt, I would go to Egypt, where my mom was from, and there was like constantly kissing on television. So yeah.
Wow. And my understanding is like from Bollywood. So like when two people are about to kiss, the flowers would brush up against each other in the wind. And that was like, oh, something's going on.
Which is hot. Like the natural world becomes a stand-in. And we had on Sundays, which it was our Sundays in Kuwait were probably, I want to say Fridays. We had only Bollywood on TV. There was nothing. I'm giving my age away now, but we only had 2 channels, and on Sundays it was Bollywood all day. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It was like, oh my God, is it gonna? No. But the dancing, there's so much dancing, and dancing is very erotic. So that was amazing.
There's a lot of like water and saris and see-through stuff and like sweat dripping and like a lot of neck sniffing, which I'm not really sure what that's about, but you know what?
It's so hot.
It really is. I think one of the other literary choices in your book that I really like is the way that you imagine futures and you imagine a reality, you imagine, and you do a lot of dreaming within it. And we're sort of almost taken on this journey before you kind of take us back and go, oh, no, sorry, that didn't happen. Now we're moving on to this bit here. And you've given us, you made that choice to give us a glimpse into your mind, not just through the memoir, but in terms of your process. What future right now do you imagine for yourself going forward? Where is Randa in 5 years? This is like an interview question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
This is great because I don't think I've talked about this, but in 5 years, I'm hoping maybe 3 years, depending on how this goes. I really want to make a film. I've been, I love writing books and I will always write books, but I also, find it very rewarding and fun to be on a set. And before pandemic, I was part of 3 different projects, one of which actually is coming to Channel 4, Rami. Everybody should watch this. So yeah, I want to, I've written a feature script that I'm developing now, and I want to either direct it or definitely executive produce it and create this cinematic sort of world that replicates like the kinds of ideas and whatever that I have going on. So yeah, in 5 years, I'm hoping I'll be completely wrapped up on that project, and it will have been screened and all of that, and I'll be working on another one. So,
hey, inshallah,
inshallah,
speak it into existence and manifest it. Yes,
yes, exactly.
I love
Yes,
it.
it's a lot of work, but I'm down.
I think there's definitely something about your work that can translate quite easily to screen, and I think just the way the poetry, the humor, everything that you talk about is just something that I want to see, and I'm really excited to meet you in 3 years' time, 2 years' time, 1 year's time, when you're on the set creating this stuff post-pandemic. To our audience, inshallah, to our audience, there is an ask a question button at the bottom, which I think is working, but I can't see all the questions coming through. Please do post questions if you have any to ask Randa or to ask myself, mainly to Randa, because I'm happy to speak them out, I guess.
Someone wrote that they saw But I'm a Cheerleader in Qatar when they were 9. That's amazing. That movie is very queer and wonderful.
I feel like I've missed out on all these queer films. I saw on your Twitter, I think, or Instagram maybe, that you posted like a queer films that you should watch instead, and mine was fire. The first queer film that I saw was on like, I think it was Channel 4, and it was like these 2 Asian women that were about to kiss, and I was like, yo, what's going on here?
I was like, watch, rewind, watch, rewind, watch, rewind.
Oh, I was watching it, and then in the ad breaks, I'd be like, you'd switch channels, because my mum would be coming down, so I couldn't tell her like what I was watching. So you'd have to keep switching and then switch back and then switching and then switch back every time you heard like the wood creak, because that she'd be coming downstairs to be like, what are you watching?
Oh yeah, no, that's terrifying. That's the surveillance, the mama surveillance.
Oh no, I think that's definitely something that I'm thinking about, like if I want kids, when I want kids, how I'm going to be with them. And you sort of mentioned this at some point as well within the novel, this kind of idea of just and you don't talk a lot about it, interestingly. So I'm really intrigued as to like that again as another choice, but you do bring it up a couple of times in the way that you would bring your children in a slightly different or you have question in a slightly different way. And again, that's a conscious choice that you make.
There's a lot of like, that's for me, that's such a different memoir, the one about raising my son. And yeah, it was just like so beautiful. I feel really lucky that I got to, like give my child the parenting that I wish I'd had, but also like have moments of recognition and understanding for my parents, like I remember when he was 15, he really wanted me to allow him to have a sleepover with a young woman, which I was fine with, but her mother wasn't. Ooh. So I just was like, I don't know what to do here, because she's underage, you're underage. It was just like one of these like very difficult moments where I didn't know. I was like, I can't allow that, because, and then I was like, who am I? I thought I would let my child do whatever they wanted sexually. And it's like, no, but there's another person involved, and that person has to consent and all that. So, but yeah, I see there are questions.
How do you see? Oh my God, no, I see them. Amazing. Okay, we've got a question here. There is a bravery that is required to be unashamedly your authentic and manifold self. Where is your source? Do you have one?
People ask me this sometimes. I honestly, I don't. I think it's all the trauma. It might be a combination of like, I didn't realize how sassy I was too until I found old school friends on Facebook. And they would say, oh, this is so typically you. You were just like this in whatever, when you were 7 or when you were, I don't remember being a sassy child. But I think like I also come from a lot of sassy people, like people, like it's a combination of nature, nurture. I'm generally rebellious. I don't like being told what to do. I think, it depends on if you're a more dominant person, more submissive person, more switch in between, which is me. And I think that switching, it creates a kind of elasticity, right, in someone's personality, but also like just being flexible about how wild you think you can be in any given situation.
Yeah.
So I would say if someone was looking for more ways to become brave and courageous in the world, I think having moments with yourself first.
Okay.
And, maybe giving yourself one challenge a week. Like when Jonathan at work says this really fucking stupid thing, I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to say, Jonathan, you've said this before.
You were going to go with a polite response. I'm like,
I really don't like this. I want you to stop. I want you to stop. Stop it. Just like trying out boundaries, basically. Trying out boundaries, knowing that the ways that people will respond to them are not your problem. And being kind to yourself in the aftermath and the lead up. Like that's just one small step you can start with.
God, that's so hard trying to keep boundaries when you've grown up in, I'm just talking about like the places that you grew up in and the context in which you've grown up where boundaries don't exist, privacy doesn't exist. It's really hard to assert that when you're older and kind of go,
I remember. So my dad, every once in a while has to like comment on the fact that I'm a large woman. And the last time he did it, I said, Baba, that's against my boundaries. I've already told you, yes, you have eyeballs, you have vision, you can see that I'm a large woman. And he said, fuck your boundaries. And I said, okay, cool. And then I just left his house and I haven't seen him in a year. And now he's like, when are you coming to visit? I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel the need to be abused, like, so that can be a boundary, if you're able to literally create distance between yourself and someone who does not accept your boundaries.
I absolutely love it. My mum yesterday accidentally, and she told me that it was an accident, watched a Facebook Live that I was on. And she had to tell me, she was like, I had it on in the background and I forgot it was on and I walked away and I didn't watch it, but it accidentally came on. And she kept telling me it was an accident. I was like, you're allowed to watch the Facebook Live. It's not an issue. But she suddenly felt like she had to like justify why I might.
That's good. That's good. That means that she wants to, that means she's creating, that means you've effectively given her a sense of like, that she needs to respect your boundaries. Honestly, if she's saying that, that's a good sign. Let her do that. Let her kind of like,
find her way. Yeah, I like it. She makes me feel guilty for it sometimes, but then she wouldn't be an Asian woman if she didn't.
Yeah,
I guess on that level. And we've got another question: is how have people responded to the book? And a second part to that is, who was your dream reader?
That's so good. I think that my ideal reader is someone who understands why my book is structured the way it's structured. So Afshan, you're an ideal reader, obviously, like my editors are ideal readers. Just the fact that they understood and that you understood that there is a kind of non-traditional, somewhat experimental way that the book is structured, and it's done that way for a reason, which is to mimic my own experiences, right? Being disoriented. And to be like, to give the story in the most gentle way I could, really. I can't, just giving someone all these like, look at all this trauma and abuse, instead I have this like kind of meandering, slow, way of giving that story to the reader. And people have responded in different ways, I try not to read my Goodreads reviews. I've had a friend tell me that there's a couple of really cruel reviews on there, and that's totally fine. I guess that's what Goodreads is for, right? And I think that's also, one of my favorite reviews of the book actually came out today in The Believer. And I'm pretty sure the woman who wrote it is Muslim and queer. And she said, if you don't like this book, you're actually not, you're not, then you are exiled. You are exiled from the story. If you don't understand the book and enjoy it, you actually don't belong in the country of the story and of the memoir. And I love that, because I'm like, oh, if you don't get it, you literally just will never get it. And good luck, take care, have fun.
I love that.
So yeah, so I love, me too. I really like that idea that it's like, well, this book is about unconditional love. And if you don't get that, then that's your own journey.
Yeah. Bye. See you later.
Bye. Go with peace. Love you.
We've got one more question. Do you have any queer Arab writers or publications that you love?
Yes, I do. Let me think for a second. I really like there's a few, maybe not publications, but I guess they would be called like co-ops or whatever, groups of folks. I think one of them would be Punk Ass Arab, which creates, artwork and zines. I also really like Salim Haddad. I love Amru al-Qadi. So Amru al-Qadi's, I would really recommend listening to their memoir called Life as a Unicorn.
Yes. Oh, that's next on my list too.
It's really fun. It's so fun. I like listening to it because I'm in love with Amru and like their voice, and I really like the act of listening to someone's story too. Yeah, there's so much out there. There's so much, and if anyone has any suggestions for women and femmes, Arab women and femmes for me to read, you can always reach me. Email me or tweet to me. I'm curious. I would love to read more. Samra Habib. Okay.
Yeah.
I will write
got her memoir. Oh, I had her memoir on my bookshelf next. I've just got a load of queer. Do you know what's really nice is the amount of queer Muslim, queer Arab books that are out here now. Because like 15 years ago, there was nothing. And
Zaina Arafat. Zaina Arafat. Zaina Arafat is amazing. I love her book. You Exist Too Much. It's really great.
Oh, these are such good recommendations. I love it.
Extremely queer, which I love. I'm like, yes. Like it's about a love addict. So there's so many like moments of falling in love, and yeah.
Would you do an audiobook version? Is there one in the pipeline?
There isn't an audiobook. It's out. So this book, yes.
Oh, I couldn't find it when I wanted to hear.
Maybe it's not available in the UK, but it's in the US. Yeah. Hopefully they'll make it available.
Is it you? You're reading it. You read it?
Yes.
No? Yes. Oh, see, I wanted that. And I was like, I just want to hear her voice. I want to know how she reads this bit. And I've not been able to find it. I wasn't able to find it.
I'll send you a copy if I can get a copy.
Oh my God, please do. Please. Yeah. Okay, we've got one more question in. I'm a young queer Muslim writer. Any advice on how to write using my own voice without worrying about other people's opinions, namely my family? Ooh.
Yeah, that's really hard. I think that it's important to. So a lot of times, young writers want the validation of their family. They want their family's support. But honestly, try to create a writing family. Try to find a family outside of your own biological or whatever cultural family. I mean, it would be great if there were intersections. Like for me, I found other Arab American / Muslim writers that I could share stuff with who would be honest with me, like, oh no, this is internalized racism, or this is, so that you're still talking to your people.
Yeah.
But try to separate from your family and not try to get their approval or their validation. Also, writing under a pseudonym is always an option. You don't have to lay your heart out. And, you know, I think if I had to do it all over again, I still wouldn't use a pseudonym, but I see the benefits. I definitely see the benefits. So yeah, don't be shy to, so many people have pseudonyms. So many people you think are not, yeah.
I used to write with a pseudonym for a long time, and then I merged my pseudonym self and my self together a few years back because I was like, fuck it, like,
good for you.
But
either way, it's cool.
And yeah, and talking about a family, an adopted family, like that's something else that I think is really important, is a writing family, a queer family, a family that is yours, that is a chosen family, that is there for you. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. Okay, the last one. Do you actively try to negotiate the interactions between the various spaces you occupy when writing, or do you just let what you're feeling when you're writing come out?
It depends on what stage I'm at with the writing. Mm-hmm. So in a very, very early draft, I think I'm just letting things come out, right? You let things flow. But sometimes, you know, you can't actually separate. You can't separate the spaces that you're coming from or that you're occupying from what you're writing. It's just the way it is. It's so imbued in what you're saying and in your experience that you just cannot separate those things. So I think the important thing is to embrace that and to write without judgment, especially the first draft. And then when you revisit, you can start shaping and making choices about how much and what you're trying to say in this particular sentence or this particular paragraph. But yeah, the key to writing is just writing, like sitting on your ass and spending a lot of time on your work. Like there's no magical, and every single writer has a different process. So, you know, I used to be obsessed in my early 20s, like, oh, this person runs for 2 miles before they write, and this person swims, and this person walks their dog, and this person is like, wow, I sit down. So that's how I write.
Yeah, I struggle to do that some days as well. So
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, writing every day, that's ideal, but I don't write every day. I write when, you know,
inspiration strikes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, or like when I already have something building up and I'm just adding to it slowly.
Yeah.
And I self-inflict deadlines, if you will. So
I was gonna say, as like commissions and deadlines have saved me, because I will write to them the night before, 1 minute to midnight. I will be sending these emails off, but like it's been so long since I've sat and I'm like, oh my god, I need to wake up 3 a.m. because this idea has just struck me. And if it does, it'll be a 1-line voice note to myself as I'm dozing off to bed that won't make any sense in the morning.
Oh my god, I love voice notes. Save me. Voice notes are that's actually how I wrote my new script, was just like voice noting concept in the middle of the night.
Yes, I can't wait. I cannot wait to see your work when it comes out. That is all we have time for today, but you can find Randa online at Randa Jarrar on Twitter, and you can also buy the book. Please buy the book. It's at I think the link has just been posted from Lightheart Books. You can also buy my book, which is
yes!
Poetry collection about sex, sexuality, what it is to love and be loved and love people. And you can follow us on Twitter. Please follow us on Twitter. Hype up your writers and poets as you hype up your rappers, because we need it. And we're all broke, or, you know, trying to survive and make a living in the world. And it's a pandemic. So buy the books and support us. And any last words? Any final words to conclude?
Just thank you so much for doing this. I can't wait to read your poetry. I can't wait to get my hands on that book. And thank you to my press, Sandstone, who've been so supportive and so wonderful. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. I know that it's evening there. I hope you have your cocktails or whatever it is that's keeping you through the night. And yeah, please have a good rest of your evening.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. See you later.